Challenge now how they work this way through Congress. So President Trump hoping to sign it into law by the end of the year.
It's the biggest cuts in the history of our country. We've really gotten great reviews. People are loving it. Even a certain newspaper that I don't like very much came out today, and they gave Schumer four Pinocchios. And they said because he was not telling the truth when it came to the middle class, because he said it's for the rich, and it's really not for the rich. It's for the middle class, and it's for jobs. And I would say maybe even in that order. So the middle class is a big beneficiary. Jobs and companies are big beneficiaries, but the companies really create the jobs. And we really have, Laura, we've had tremendous receptivity to it, to a point that I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it. So, and I do think Rand Paul, by the way, who I like, I think he's going to vote for it.
Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill for us. What has been the reaction there on the Hill among Republicans?
Well, Sandra, good morning. Most House Republicans tell me they're really fired up to get moving on a huge legislative priority. Here are some of the key points. It creates fewer tax brackets, 0%, 12%, 25%, 35%, while maintaining the top bracket at 39.6%. Nearly doubles the standard deduction, raises the child tax credit from $1,000 to $1,600, and leaves 401k savings rules intact. On the business side, it slashes the corporate rate from 35% to 20%. It cuts the rate on small business income to 25%, repeals the alternative minimum tax, and doubles the death tax exemption, repealing it after 6 years. This morning, the House Majority Leader talked about next steps.
We're looking out of the House. We want to get it done this month. So Ways and Means will take it up next week. And as soon as it comes out of through committee, just like we say, regular order, it'll go all through committee, mark up, then it'll come to the floor. I'd like to see this done before Thanksgiving.
Something to watch. Some Republicans from high-tax states, Lee Zeldin from New York and Leonard Lance in New Jersey, say the changes in the state and local tax deduction are unacceptable. So you can bet House Republican leaders are going around to northeastern state Republicans, seeing where they stand on this tax package.
A lot developing at this hour. What are we hearing from Democrats now that they've had a look at this plan, Mike?
That's right, Sandra. Senate Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer says his side intends to fight this tax reform package tooth and nail.
This plan is a tax burden that ought to be on the backs of the wealthy and the biggest corporations, but instead it drops it squarely on the backs of the middle class.
Some top Republicans here on Capitol Hill are hopeful some Senate Democrats will eventually support the final tax package, but they are clearly not there yet. Sandra?
All right, Mike Emanuel, thank you.
Keep in mind they passed that budget by 2 votes. Just 2. Meanwhile, on board Air Force One right now, President Trump heading to Hawaii, Pearl Harbor as we speak. First stop on his trip to Asia. Could go at 10, 11 days now amid growing tensions with North Korea. And that's going to be topic number 1. Rich Edson live at the State Department for more there. And Rich, good morning. What is confronting the president and perhaps confronting North Korea at the top of this agenda?
Good morning, Bill. And the first few stops of this trip for the president and his delegation will be Japan, South Korea, and China, countries that are either under threat from North Korea or, in the case of China, allied with North Korea. So just before he left the South Lawn at the White House this morning, about an hour ago, the president says he is expecting good things from this trip.
I think we're going to have great success. We'll be talking about trade. We'll be talking about, obviously, North Korea. We'll be enlisting the help of a lot of people and countries. We'll see what happens, but I think we're going to have a very successful trip. There's a lot of goodwill.
For Japan and South Korea, President Trump's visit is a show of support of the 2 U.S. allies, where the United States has maintained a military presence since the middle of last century. A senior administration official says, unlike his secretaries of state and defense and his vice president, President Trump will skip a visit to the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea because it's becoming cliched. A senior administration official also says China is doing a great deal to pressure North Korea, more than expected, though added it can always do more. And with that, yesterday, the Treasury Department announced that it was cutting off a small Chinese bank from the entire U.S. financial system because of alleged ties to the North Korean ballistic missile program, Bill.
Thank you, Rich. On that, there are also issues regarding the economy. And I would imagine in Beijing, China, these will be at the forefront. What are you hearing?
Absolutely. The president just a couple of days ago called the trade imbalance with China. He used the words horrible, embarrassing, and through the roof. It was a central tenet of President Trump's pitch to voters last year. It's something that the president and this administration say they are going to tackle when they go to China. Also, there are differences on Chinese cyber thieves taking information and intellectual property from U.S. companies. And there's also a dispute in the South China Sea with China militarizing an area of disputed islands. So there is plenty to discuss between the two countries as the president makes his trip to Beijing.
Thank you, Rich. Rich Edson, State Department. Bit of a preview there. Sandra.
For more on this, let's bring in Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace. He joins us live from Washington this morning. Chris, always good to see you.
Good to be with you, Sandra.
All right, so a busy Friday. The president has just left on this now 11-day trip. As he said, they're tacking on another day in the Philippines there. What does the president need to accomplish?
Well, I think there really are a couple of things. Certainly the most dramatic moment and the most dramatic pictures will be the president in South Korea. If he's in the capital of Seoul, he's 30 miles from the demilitarized zone, well within the range of North Korean missiles and artillery. And that will be, even if he isn't in the demilitarized zone, still a pretty dramatic statement of him trying to rally the South Koreans, to rally the Japanese, our allies in the region, to stand up to North Korea and its nuclear ambitions. And there has been talk about the possibility, and the president talked about it at various points during the campaign, about South Korea and Japan developing their own nuclear programs. That's something that China very much would not like to see, countries in the region, in the neighborhood, having their own nuclear weapons. It'll be interesting to see how much the president plays that. As I said, I think that's the most dramatic part of the trip. The most important part of the trip clearly will be his visit to Beijing to meet with President Xi, who has just gotten 5 more years in power and really is in tremendous command of that government now, just personally, not the Communist Party, but he himself. And obviously the question there is the degree to which they can work out something on trade, as was discussed with Rich Edson, but also the Chinese applying more pressure. They seem to have done a lot, but it doesn't seem to have much impact on Kim Jong-un scaling back his missile or nuclear programs. And
he mentioned to Laura Ingraham last night in that interview that he may be meeting with Vladimir Putin. That could be certainly a big moment as well. He leaves on the heels of this major rollout of the tax reform plan, the details being released yesterday. As far as you can tell, how is this rollout going so far?
Well, I think it's going pretty well in terms of Republicans. There's not, at least at this point, and certainly not in the House, picking up any Democratic support. The interesting thing, we're going to have an exclusive interview on Sunday with Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, and I've really been digging into the plan. There are winners and losers in this plan in terms of middle-class taxpayers. Yes, it generally cuts tax rates, and it does increase some of the deductions. On the other hand, there are things in there that haven't been talked about a lot. For instance, if you have a lot of medical expenses, you lose the ability to deduct those from your taxes. If you have student loans, you lose the ability to deduct your student loans from your taxes. And as has been talked about, state and local income taxes. So there are certainly going to be, I think most middle-class taxpayers will see a tax cut, but there are certainly going to be some, and it'll depend on your individual situation, whether you live in a blue, one of these high-tax states or not, where you could be worse off. So I think there's going to be real impact both ways.
All right, so you heard it here first. Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, coming on Fox News Sunday this weekend. I want to get also to this piece of Laura's interview with the president when she asked him about the many positions that still have yet to be filled. Here was the president's response.
I'm a business person, and I tell my people, well, you don't need to fill slots, don't fill them. But we have some people that I'm not happy with their thinking process.
But Assistant Secretary of State, you're not getting rid of that position.
But let me tell you, the one that matters is me. I'm the only one that matters, because when it comes to it, that's what the policy is going to be. You've seen that. You've seen it strongly.
That was his answer to questions about filling positions at the State Department. He was asked about Rex Tillerson. Is he going to stay? He said, we'll see. But his response, I'm the only one that matters.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of broad policy, he is the only one that matters. He's the president. He sets the policy. But I will tell you, having talked to a number of foreign diplomats, they're very frustrated at all the positions that have not been filled at the State Department. And, you know, a lot of people, when you're doing business, you're not doing business with the president. You're not doing business with the Secretary of State. You're doing business with an assistant secretary, somebody in a senior political position. And a lot of those slots are still left vacant. And in terms of Rex Tillerson, Laura Ingraham asked the president, will he be here for the duration? Well, of course, duration. Does that mean 4 years? Does it mean 8 years? But it certainly was not, on the president's part, a ringing vote of confidence. And, of course, we all know that this president and Tillerson have had their difficulties. And they're going to be sharing a lot of space together on this foreign trip. The Secretary of State will be with the president. Be interesting to see how often they have meals together.
That will be interesting. And to quote the president, we'll see what happens. Chris Wallace, thanks for joining us this morning.
You bet. Thank you, Sandra.
Very much forward looking to that Paul Ryan interview on Sunday. He's an acolyte of Jack Kemp, going back to the late 1980s and 1990s. And Paul Ryan will tell you he's lived his entire political life for this moment. Tax reform, generational reform.
This is it.
And we'll see whether or not they get it done, too.
And we'll be watching.
Sunday. Yep. There are also developments now from the Paul Manafort matter. What a judge in a moment. What a judge has said about his next appearance in court. Fill you in on that. Is
Attorney General Jeff Sessions facing new questions about Russia? What two former members of the campaign are now saying about possible connections to Moscow.
And as we speak, Air Force One en route to Hawaii and then Asia after that, talking tough on North Korea. President Trump warning the world is running out of time.
I tell China and I tell everyone else that listens, I mean, you're going to have yourself a big problem with Japan pretty soon if you allow this to continue with North Korea.
Are you going to make any pledges to Japan to defend them?
Well, look, they're an ally. They've become very, very close to President Xi of China. I think
the district judge in Washington with new orders for Paul Manafort, his associate Rick Gates, that judge expressing concerns that could pose a flight risk. She ordered them to remain under house arrest with GPS tracking until at least next week. Manafort's lawyers say the bail conditions are misplaced. Manafort and Gates both indicted on Monday of charges of conspiracy and money laundering.
Democrats demanding more answers from Attorney General Jeff Sessions about the campaign's connections to Russia. After former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page testified, he told Sessions about a trip to Russia last year. Former Utah Congressman Jason Chaffetz is a Fox News contributor. Is that likely to spur more scrutiny over all of this, Congressman?
Well, look, the Attorney General has one of the most difficult positions in all of Washington, D.C., and the beauty of our system, the beauty of America is you don't get to hide. You know, to his credit, Eric Holder regularly appeared before both the House and the Senate, and Attorney General Sessions is going to have to answer for himself. There are tough questions from Democrats as well as Republicans, and not just on this topic where there really doesn't appear to be much, but I'm sure the Democrats will want to ask him.
The president just saying a few moments ago, as he was leaving for his trip to Asia, there was no collusion. He made that very clear when he was being prompted to respond to all of this. Democrats want more answers. You agree it's time for Jeff Sessions to testify again then on Russia?
Well, he should come testify. Whatever members ask is up to them as individuals. But here we are coming up in November, and he has yet to testify before the House Judiciary Committee. And there are lots of questions. I think it's a waste of time for the Democrats to continue to pound something where they've been able to produce absolutely no evidence. You talk to people on the on the Intelligence Committee, and they'll regularly tell you, we haven't seen anything yet. But the Attorney General has to answer a lot of questions. And you just had the president, before he got on Air Force One, express again that he's losing confidence over there at the Department of Justice. And there are a lot of us that are very frustrated that you don't see the Attorney General and the Department of Justice pursuing the Uranium One, looking into the fusion GPS issue, and certainly all these issues with Donna Brazile.
So you're saying that's fair criticism. What is going on?
Yeah. Well, that's why the Attorney General needs to come to the House of Representatives and the Senate. He's been to the Senate a couple times, but he's never been over there in the House before Judiciary and answer questions. That's what we do. We are self-critical in this country. And believe me, I pounded on the Democrats to get them to come, and the same should be true to getting Republicans in the administration before the House of Representatives. It has to happen both ways.
Let's deal with the latest on Carter Page, the former Trump foreign policy advisor. He testified he told Sessions about his trip in 2016. He's responding with this statement. This came out yesterday. Back in June 2016, I mentioned in passing that I happened to be planning to give a speech at a university in Moscow, completely unrelated to my limited volunteer role with the campaign, and as I've done dozens of times, he said, throughout my life. Understandably, it was as irrelevant then as it is now. Your response to that?
No, it does seem totally irrelevant. Look, Jeff Sessions was a sitting United States Senator. He was an advisor on the campaign, but to suggest that is something nefarious is totally different than, say, maybe Uranium One, where hundreds of millions of dollars traded hands and the United States gave up 20% of its uranium reserves. That seems a lot more interesting and pertinent to the safety and security of the United States than somebody who went and just gave a speech. And hey, by the way, I was given a speech. Well, I mean, what is that? I don't see the relevance at all, but I'm sure the Democrats will want to ask questions about it, and the Attorney General should have to answer those questions.
Let me last ask you about George Papadopoulos pleading guilty to lying to the FBI about his contacts with Russia. Documents now show Papadopoulos he suggested he could arrange a meeting. Where does this go?
Well, I mean, he was a young person in his early 30s, kind of fluffing up his chest, suggesting that, hey, I could get Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin together. I mean, it's kind of laughable on the surface. It went to one meeting. Again, this is nothing about nothing, as best I can tell.
The president, for his part, says the real collusion is with the Democrats, and the focus should be there. We heard that from him this morning as well. And we've heard that from you many times as well, Congressman. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Ed.
20 minutes past the hour, there's been a disturbance in the world of Twitter that deals directly with the commander-in-chief. His account went offline for 11 minutes. What Twitter is saying about how this happened, and the answer is a bit surprising.
All right. Plus, new information on the suspect in a triple murder at a Colorado Walmart and what his neighbors are saying about him.
Did do a lot of suspicious activity. He was always looking out the windows, which I'm across the field. So we're at eye level, and I could see, that he was just being paranoid.
Shooting near Denver is due to make his first court appearance today. And as the investigation continues, neighbors are describing him as a loner.
Never talked to anybody. Kind of looked at you like evil, like if you did something wrong. When he would walk up the stairs and pass us by, he never talked to us. He didn't say excuse me or nothing. It was like he wanted to kick us out of the way or something.
47-year-old Scott Ostrom was arrested outside his home yesterday. Police have no motive yet for the attack that killed 3 people.
Real tragedy there. Twitter now launching an internal investigation. President Trump's account briefly shut down, and now we know why. He wrote this, quote, my Twitter account was taken down for 11 minutes by a rogue employee. I guess the word must finally be getting out and having an impact, end tweet. William Ageness follows up in L.A. on this. What happened, William?
Well, the question is, Bill, do you believe Twitter's explanation? And does Twitter actually believe that a single employee on their last day on the job accidentally deleted the president's Twitter feed? So visitors to the real Donald Trump last night around 7 p.m. were told that page doesn't exist. Twitter says, well, we have learned that this was done by a Twitter customer support employee who did this on the employee's last day, and we're conducting a full internal review. So why do some doubt that? Well, suspending an account is serious, especially a celebrity, let alone a user with 41 million followers. Do you believe that one low-level employee that has that authority, that there were no internal controls, no second set of eyes before hitting the delete button? Secondly, if this was accidental, what was the tripwire out of 300 million accounts that prompted this employee to take control of the president's Twitter feed. Now, you'd think after the backlash that Twitter received after suspending the account of actress Rose McGowan after she tweeted about being sexually harassed, that there might be more internal controls. So this comes at a bad time for tack number one, facing criticism for failing to stop Russian propaganda on their platforms, and secondly, for the anti-conservative bias for taking down Trump while, of course, allowing his sometimes crude and hate speech of his critics to remain on the site. Well, that could reinforce that perception. Bill?
Thank you, William. It's back online now, though. William Lajeunesse there live in L.A. Which brings us to an interesting question. I mean, if you knew it was your last day on the job, what would you do? Would you try and hijack your company, or would you go out quietly and take the high road? It's A or B. You can tweet us. And
quite a move. That's
pretty,
one way to go out.
I think gutsy is the word. Is it gutsy?
Yeah, that's fair.
A few others, too.
All right. Well, the president optimistic about his 5-nation trip to Asia while issuing a new warning to North Korea how the rogue regime will impact this trip.
Yeah, watch that story. Also, war of words between pizza rivals. You're never going to guess what this is about. Why these companies are spinning more than just pizza dough.
Are you Papa John's or Pizza Hut? Neither?
Domino's.
I'm a Chicago girl. It's neither.
When the world seems to shine like you've had too much wine, that's amore.
Starbucks this morning. Officers say a masked gunman opened fire at that coffee shop in Chicago's Uptown neighborhood last night. A 28-year-old man was killed, 2 others injured, including a 12-year-old boy. Police say all 3 victims knew each other. The shooter is still on the loose. Cops say it appears to have been sparked by a botched drug deal.
I must tell you, North Korea is a thing that I think we will solve, and if we don't solve it, it's not going to be very pleasant for them. It's not going to be very pleasant, I guess, for anybody. But China is helping us.
All right, that from President Trump sitting down with Laura Ingraham. You saw it last night, 10 o'clock Eastern here, issuing a new threat on North Korea. As the president flies to Asia as we speak, Kim Jong-un accusing the U.S. of practicing for a nuclear strike. There was another flyby just in the last few days here. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz, retired Green Beret commander, former counterterrorism advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney out of Jacksonville today. Michael, welcome back. Good morning to you.
Thanks, Bill.
2 U.S. strategic bombers conducting drills over South Korea. How does the president move the meter on the issue of North Korea, be it China or Russia or both?
Well, the entire region, Kim Jong-un, President Xi of China, need to understand that military force is a real option here. And actually, that's what helps our diplomacy. So we've had a round of UN sanctions. We've had the Chinese order their banking system to not do business with North Korea. But the Chinese are fantastic at kind of saying what the world wants to hear publicly and then really doing nothing privately, because they see this problem as a U.S., Japan, South Korea problem, not their problem. And so I'm looking for President Trump to hold their feet to the fire.
Okay, now he alluded to a meeting potentially with Vladimir Putin in that same interview with Laura Ingraham. I imagine it will take place because merely suggesting it lends itself to the possibility that it's probably on the 51% side of that happening. But also he suggested the reason why he would meet with him is because he thinks Putin can help him on North Korea. Do you see Moscow moving that way?
Well, you know, Putin is inserting himself into this process because it's one more piece of leverage that he will have, you know, across the spectrum of issues, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Crimea, whether it's Syria, and, you know, whether it's their attack on our political system. So he's inserting himself as a kind of a third party here. We have to have the North Korean regime isolated. And I think, you know, it really the key is for the Chinese. President Xi just got reelected. If you read his speech, he asserted himself as the, you know, leader of the new superpower. You know, whether it's the South China Sea and them seizing islands, currency manipulation, cyber attacks, stealing of the U.S. technological edge. You know, there's a number of issues that we have to deal with the Chinese, but first and foremost is going to be isolating North Korea. The Chinese could solve this problem
You're going
tomorrow.
to need more than one meeting to handle all that. The list is very long.
Right.
Quickly on this, then I want to turn to Iran.
Sure.
Oftentimes these trips have a let's say, a pre-baked headline before the trip begins. Do you think that's the case here, or would you even know?
You know, I think we have such a, there's just such a menu of issues to deal with here across all of those. I think what you're going to see, though, is you're going to see a personal relationship continue to develop with both President Trump and Xi. That's a good thing in many ways. That's important on the world stage. But make no mistake, Xi sees himself as a leader of our new competitor. And they see themselves as an equal of the United States. They're going to push the United States out of Asia. And they do not share our values in any way, shape, or form.
Let's see what comes of that relationship. The North Koreans saying the U.S. imperialist warmongers should not act rashly, end quote. Hillary Clinton's got a big problem with the way the administration's handling the Iran deal. She said the following just yesterday.
It pains me greatly to see the cavalier attitude that this administration is showing toward that agreement, which did put a lid on Iran's nuclear program. Did it end all of Iran's bad behavior? No, it did not. But I would rather deal with their bad behavior while stopping their centrifuges than trying to deal with their bad behavior while the centrifuges are spinning in underground, undisclosed facilities, which is what was happening when we started.
So you've got a clear comparison on policy, Michael.
Look,
she's making an obvious point about what the administration of the Obama years pursued.
Right.
Do you see it doing a 180 right now with this administration?
Yeah, look, I don't think it was a cavalier attitude at all from the administration. We have discussed many times the pains with which the administration has tried to tackle what I think is the worst diplomatic agreement the U.S. has entered in modern history, that only kicked the can on Iran's program rather than ended it, and essentially signaled to the entire Middle East they have 10 years to get their own nuclear program because the United States isn't willing to stop not only its program, but its support of terrorism, its cyber attacks, and all of the other nefarious activities Iran is up to. So I just find that beyond the pale, but unfortunately not surprising.
Michael, thank you. More to come on this. Out of Jacksonville today, enjoy Florida. Michael Waltz there. Thank you for coming in today.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, it's Friday, so let's talk pizza. There's a hot feud between two pizza giants. Papa John's blaming its falling sales on the national anthem protests during NFL games. The CEO put out this statement saying, quote, the NFL has hurt us, and more importantly, by not resolving the current debacle to the players' and owners' satisfaction, NFL leadership has hurt Papa John's. While our rival Pizza Hut is singing a different tune, saying we're not seeing any impact from any of that on our business after the company has had sales grow over the past 5 consecutive quarters. Meanwhile, the frozen pizza company DiGiorno's, the frozen aisle at the grocery store, well, they're just poking the bear, tweeting out this jab: better pizza, better sales. Drop the mic on that.
This is pretty good, right? Just leave the room, right? But take a large pepperoni.
All right, so you're neither. You're a Domino's guy?
Well, I mean, you were asking me about, in New York, I'm Joe's Pizza, Carmine and Bleecker. Make sure you check it out next time you're in New York City.
So when it comes to chains.
I'm kind of a Domino, the large pepperoni. Get it while it's hot. I don't think you can lose. Apparently that's not selling with you, though, is it?
Yeah, I'm a Chicago girl. We know our pizza. Bricks Pizza in Chicago.
Bricks,
it's the
I like it.
Best. The Berserkly pizza.
Sorry, is that deep dish?
No,
it's
deep dish.
thin, flat.
Oh, come on.
Optimism. Is it sweeping the country, reviving your American dream? If so, what's behind that change? We'll look at that in a moment. Plus, there is this. Check it out.
Police in hot pursuit of a stolen ambulance as the suspect drives off with a patient and medic still inside.
The slow speed chase, state in Ohio, police tracking down a stolen ambulance through the streets, and it kind of went like this. Folks, in the back of that truck is a patient and a medic. Happened about 2 weeks ago, Dayton, Ohio, as I mentioned. Police arresting the man behind the wheel, who eventually pulled over and went straight to jail. Police say the suspect jumped in that ambulance and drove off while the medic was treating a patient. Don't see it every day, do you? Good for the cops there.
That's not good.
Ohio. Good work.
All right.
Are you getting the credit for this economic revival without your tax cut yet through, without Obamacare repeal yet. And this is a stunning economic revival in 10 months.
One of the greatest in the history of our country. And I'm in here now 10 months, and we are setting record after record, day after day. I think we hit another one today. No, I'm not getting enough credit for it, because a lot of the reason is enthusiasm level, business level, and also the fact that I've cut regulations to the extent that I've cut them. I mean, I could tell you jobs that were never going to get built are now being built.
President Trump might not be getting enough credit because thanks to this country's economic revival, the American dream is making a big comeback 3 years after a poll found that most of us believed it was out of reach. A brand new poll finds 82% now believe they're either living the dream or on their way to achieving it. Rachel Campos Duffy is a Fox News contributor. Leslie Marshall is a syndicated radio host and Fox News contributor. A positive sign there, Rachel?
Absolutely. It's morning in America. And he's right. He's not getting enough credit for it. It is, we've turned the page on a community organizer president. We've put in a businessman president. And while the resistance was crocheting pink hats, Donald Trump was, basically dismantling the regulatory environment that Barack Obama had put up. I mean, I just want to say that this was right out of the progressive playbook to tell people that the American dream was rigged or unachievable or no longer attainable, because of course, if that's true, you need them. You need big government. And what we're seeing is the American dream is alive. They're saying that Hispanics, by the way, 51% of Hispanics now say they're on their way to achieving the American dream that was only 30% under Barack Obama. This is fantastic news.
I mean, Leslie, to Rachel's
American
point,
families.
a lot of people look at Hillary Clinton's campaign and say she didn't focus on the economy enough. Look at this poll, what it reveals about what Americans think about wealth and the American dream. 11% say it's essential to them. 49% say it's important. So you've got 60% of Americans saying the wealth and the American dream is everything to them.
Yeah, but a couple of things. When you look at all of the Pew Research study that was conducted in the middle of August, I'm kind of wondering what people would say today in light of recent events in the news. But when we look at what the people want, it's not money primarily. That does work for the wealthy when you look at the breakdown of this. And also, if you look at this, almost half of the people say they've already achieved this. And I find it hard to believe. I certainly couldn't, even if I were president, take credit after 10 months for somebody who's already achieved something. That would be something in the process and in the making.
Well,
but yes, it is the economy student, and I did say that Hillary did not touch upon that during her campaign.
I'll let Rachel respond to that.
We've had two quarters of 3% growth. The Atlanta Fed now says we're heading towards 4.5% growth. This is incredible. Think about this. 6 years ago, Bernie Sanders said the American dream was more likely to, you're more likely to achieve it in Venezuela. He's now taken that off his website. Listen, the American dream is back, and it's back in America because we're returning to free enterprise. We're putting America first. We're bringing jobs back from overseas. We're seeing jobs that the Democrats said were gone forever in mining, in logging, in energy, in coal. He has not only with the Republican Congress, by the way, not only revived, and we're seeing a revival of the American economy, but he's doing it without leaving the American worker behind.
And by the way, Leslie, we're having this conversation on a morning where we just got new numbers out from the government showing the unemployment rate in this country dropped to a 17-year low, 4.1%. Wow. More than 200,000 jobs were added on the last month. These are positive developments. It sounds to me you're not giving the president credit, saying he's not been there long enough. But has he at least created, will you admit to this, a positive environment by talking about taxes and tax reform and tax cuts and rolling back some of these regulations that businesses themselves have said have impeded their ability to do business or slowed it down?
The devil is in the details here, Sandra. I mean, the numbers just don't show that there are jobs coming back from overseas in his own company. The Trump company makes a lot of products overseas, and continues to do that. And continues to do that. Sorry, Rachel, if I could finish. With regard to your question, I want to have America be prosperous, regardless of who's president. But tax reform is something both Democrats and Republicans have been talking about a long time. How they do it and the way they go about it, obviously, as we're seeing today, is very different.
Leslie, I think to continue this conversation, before we go back to Rachel, tell me, what is the American dream today? What do you see it as?
Well, that's actually an excellent question, because that's what they talk about in the Pew Research poll, is that different people describe it and define it differently. And that does show across political lines and across racial and ethnic lines as well. For some people, it is money. For some people, it is owning their own home. But for some people, happiness does not have a dollar sign attached to it.
And important to point out also this other study that 70% of the middle class, Rachel, 70% of middle class voters do not believe that the next generation will do as good as they have, moving the American dream out of reach for millions. So, sorry, this was looking back at the last year and how we have completely seen that trend change. So you are giving this president the credit for that.
Listen, it was only a few years ago, Sandra, that my husband would go to a town hall and he would ask that question, will your children do better than you? And no one would raise their hand. And now we're seeing an absolute reversal of that. How can she not give the president and the Republican Congress and, frankly, American entrepreneurial capitalism and free markets credit for that? Because that's what we're doing right now. We are bringing American business back. We're bringing the economy back. It's good for families. And guess what? It's going to help the Republicans in the midterms and possibly in the next re-election for the president.
Leslie, I'll give a last word to you, because it seems like you don't like the way things are going.
Well, I like growth economically. Like I said, I don't care who's president, but I'm not alone in this. I mean, 3 days ago, there was a poll that showed 59% of Americans feel that we're in the worst of times. The president's approval rating dropped down to 33% on Wednesday, went up 4 points and still at a lower than low number than other presidents. So I think it depends on the poll. And as we know, both Democrats and Republicans, presidents and others, use polls to their benefit.
It's Friday.
And mock
Rachel,
them
can
when
you
they
lead
don't
me
like the
off
results.
on an optimistic, positive note here?
The American dream is alive. American companies are coming back to America. It's morning in America. Leslie and I should both be celebrating that.
All right. 82% of Americans say the American dream is within reach. We hope that we feel that as we all go into the weekend. Thank you to you both for being here. Good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
John Scott's coming up next and Happening Now. Quick preview of what's cooking down there. Hey, John, good morning.
Good Friday morning to you, Bill. New reaction from a leading Democrat after excerpts from former DNC chair Donna Brazil's book, Rock That Party, who's now saying the Dems presidential race was rigged and what ought to be done about it. And big new barriers are going up along New York City's West Side Highway to prevent a vehicular terror attack from ever happening again. But critics say what's helping with one safety concern might be creating another. Happening Now, top of the hour.
See you, John. 10 minutes away.
Thanks.
The first daughter arriving in Japan before her father's big trip. The issues Ivanka Trump is pushing at a critical time. That's next.
All too often, our workplace culture fails to treat women with appropriate respect. This takes many forms, including harassment, which can
expensive iPhone Apple has ever released. The iPhone 10 starts at about $1,000. It hits stores today. But if you didn't pre-order the popular device, which many of you have, well, good luck getting one. Lots of Apple fans camped out for over 24 hours. But many people on those long lines said it was, well, they say it was worth the wait, Bill.
They're fanatics, right?
Oh.
Very interesting. I mean, would you? I mean, most phones are what, between $500–700. Would you go $1,000 to buy a new iPhone? Fundamental question.
I'm not crazy. I don't need the latest, greatest. I'm all right with what I've got for right now.
I'd probably do it. I'd probably wait for the next generation. I think that we look at these phones 100 times a day.
It's true.
You could probably live without your car before you could live without your iPhone now. So, I mean, I think if you use that as a barometer, I think the price is actually
all right. Sounds like Mr. Hemmer is in the market for a new iPhone.
Well, maybe iPhone X1, 11 comes out. All right. Ivanka Trump also overseas now ahead of her father's arrival. She is in Japan and speaking out on key issues for women around the world. Kitty Logan is live in London watching that part of the trip now. Kitty, what's happening?
Hi, Bill. Well, Ivanka Trump is in Japan a couple of days ahead of her father. She's been meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. She had a dinner with him today. He had invited her to address the World Assembly for Women earlier on. At that conference, she called for more affordable childcare for working women. She said there should be more women involved in science and technology jobs. And she also spoke out against harassment of women at work.
All too often, our workplace culture fails to treat women with appropriate respect. This takes many forms, including harassment, which can never be tolerated.
Now, the conference is part of the Japanese Prime Minister's initiative to bring more women into the workplace, and that is, of course, a subject which Ivanka Trump is also very passionate about.
Now, what role, if any, will she have during the president's 10, 11-day tour?
Well, Ivanka Trump will be leaving Japan a day before her father arrives. And on this visit, she doesn't have any official role. Of course, she is the president's informal advisor, but her meeting with Shinzo Abe doesn't have any direct connection with the official presidential trip. And she is expected to return to her job, her work in the White House while that trip is underway. Bill.
Thank you, Kitty. Kitty Logan watching that trip from London. Sandra, what's next?
As President Trump heads to Asia, Republicans on Capitol Hill are pushing their tax plan. What will it take to win critics over?